Is your liberal professor giving you problems because you oppose same-sex marriage? If so, you need some quick rebuttals that show how same-sex marriage doesn't work.
Because, as we all know, when trying to argue that a specific segment of society should have a portion of their rights taken away, the best way in which to make a well-informed case is to offer a collection of quick gobbets. The main question on my mind is whether you actually have something new to offer, or merely the same old scientifically and ethically illiterate drivel I am so used to rendering apart. Now, considering the fact that this is targeted towards students, I will accept nothing less than the former.
Keep watching, because we're going to help you fight back.
You will write 100 times on the blackboard. I will be politically correct in class.
We don't say traditional marriage in this class. That is bigoted. The Bible is not history.
The work of Darwin is irrefutable.
A fetus is just a clump of cells. We are all equal. Plants, animals, people.
All right, that's it. Enough is enough.
What's up with the Cristiano wet dream of Christian persecution that you have concocted as your introduction? I get that you are a Christian group and that your attachment to reality is already at a disadvantage as a result, but in all sincerity, when has this ever actually happened outside of Christian faith porn, such as God's Not Dead and A Matter of Faith? I can find plenty of teachers abusing their students with threats of violence, racism and misogyny because America is a good Christian nation, but not a single case at all like the examples you allude to here. Now, I know why you create this fictitious narrative. You do so because it fuels your Christian ego based around John chapter 15 verse 18 onward. But to us it just shows us how detached you really are.
Before jumping into the topic, I want to say that we have no intention to defame or disparage anyone. By intellectually opposing individuals or organizations that promote the homosexual agenda, our only goal is to defend the sacred institution of marriage and the family and protect the treasures of Christian civilization. You and I have every right to defend the truth in charity.
First of all, marriage predated the creation of Christianity by at least a couple thousand years. Secondly, same-sex marriage was a thing until it was ruled illegal on punishment of death during the Christianization of Rome during the 4th century. However, whilst you went out of your way to bastardize the traditional definition of marriage to exclude same-sex variants, the Church itself didn't really get involved in marriage until the 13th century, where the Lateran Council started pushing for further engagement. But even then, it was only in 1563 that the Council of Trent declared that a member of clergy must be present in order for the marriage to be officiated. So this myth that marriage is Christian and has always been important to Christianity, or Christian civilization as you term it, does not stand to the slightest historical scrutiny. And yes, attempting to deny a group of people their rights is an attack on said people.
Okay, let's go to our first reason. Number 1, it's not marriage.
Calling something marriage does not make it marriage. Marriage has always been the covenant between a man and a woman. That's how children come into the world. That's how families are formed.
A man and a woman has nothing to do with it.
Why does that,
nothing to do with it.
Why does that offend you?
Shame on your definition of marriage.
Same-sex unions are not marriages because they deny the self-evident distinction between male and female, between mother and father. It's very simple. Two entirely different things cannot be called the same thing.
Except, as has been demonstrated already, utilizing actual historical information, marriage did once include same-sex variants. However, that fact alone is not what makes it justified. What makes it justified is bodily autonomy between two consenting adults and the right to the same recognition under secular law as intersex variants. This is also known as marriage equality. Yet your definition fails for further reasons. Namely, it fails on account that, no, marriage is not simply for children. There are many cis heterosexual couples out there who, for some reason or another, are unable to conceive children, as well as those who have no desire, whether it be because they wish to remain childless altogether, or perhaps they wish to adopt instead. Both are equally valid choices in life and do not cheapen marriage at all. But same-sex couples can also have children just like intersex couples. Currently this occurs through surrogacy and adoption, as well as in some cases where a trans individual does not have a desire to go through SRS, but in the very near future there will be new technology that will allow for two cis same-sex parents to have a child with both parents' DNA. This is something we are already on the verge of completing.
Number 2. It violates natural law.
Marriage is not just any relationship between two people. It's deeply rooted in human nature itself, which is governed by natural law. Now, natural law's most basic precept is this: to do what's good and avoid what's evil. By reason, we know what is morally good or bad. Thus, we understand the purpose of our actions. In marriage, the procreative act of husband and wife has a primary purpose, procreation. To intentionally circumvent that purpose violates natural law and the objective norm of morality.
This has presupposed heteronormativity in nature, which does not stand up to scientific scrutiny. Homosexuality in animals has been demonstrated many times. In particular, bonobos, a strand of chimpanzees we share a close heritage with, are well documented in their bisexual nature. Likewise, same-sex attraction is as old as our species itself, and can be seen existing throughout history, and has even made its way into some creation myths like the Inuit story of Akalajutsi and Umarnatuk. Both being described as men, this Inuit myth of Adam and Steve, as we'll call it, fell in love and expressed said love rather physically. However, this resulted in Steve becoming pregnant, a fact which did not bode well due to a lack of birthing canal and modern medicine. But as the myth goes, Adam and Steve used magic to transform Steve into a woman, so that the now Eve could give birth successfully, and is the origin for all humanity. Do tell me how, if homosexuality was against innate human nature, how did some Inuit creation stories come to include such characters? So to claim it goes against basic human nature is an objectively demonstrable lie. And as for your crack about good and evil, I see withholding the rights of another person without any actual justification to be the real evil. You simply asserting same-sex marriage is bad does not make it so. I expect you to demonstrate a basic argument surrounding the ethics of autonomy and harm, and in your failure to supply such an argument, I would then expect you to retract your demands to withhold the rights of others, as is demanded by basic decency.
Every child should be raised by his natural mother and father. This rule is confirmed by the obvious difficulties faced by orphan children. A child who lives in a same-sex union environment is never going to have his biological mother or father. He will always be missing a mother or father role model. Through this, we can see that the homosexual movement downgrades and discards motherhood and fatherhood as something necessary for a child, even when children themselves naturally crave for a mother or father.
And there are single parents like my mom all across the country who do a heroic job raising terrific kids. But I still wish I had a dad who was not only around but involved.
It's funny that your evidence is Obama's personal opinion, and yet Obama disagrees with you on marriage equality entirely. What this means is that your conclusion is messed up. You're warping what they are saying to make an argument they never make, and to reach a conclusion they can't reach. That's without noting the fact that same-sex couples do just as well at raising adopted children as cis heterosexual couples. Lesbians in many cases have been shown to actually do better. Now, Columbia Law School did a meta-analysis of 78 such studies and only found 4 of said studies showed children of same-sex couples doing any worse. Now, one of those studies was later rebuked and led to the journal performing an audit that came out criticizing the lapse in peer review. Another study found that in 2006, children of same-sex parents were only 65% as likely to graduate. Now, considering the existence of groups such as yours, which legitimize the bullying and ostracization of such kids today, I can fully understand the possibility of this 10 years ago. The third was a similar study looking at scholarly ability from 1996. The latter was more interesting, showing increased psychological problems for children raised in same-sex households. However, the reason this study conflicted with nearly every other study was declared in the conclusion. The reduced risk of child emotional problems with opposite-sex married parents compared to same-sex parents is explained almost entirely by the fact that married opposite-sex parents tend to raise their own joint biological offspring, while same-sex parents never do this, i.e., they did not compare children adopted by intersex couples to children adopted by same-sex couples. The impact of this was the extraneous variable of being put through the adoption system was not removed and affected results. Now, I thought this would be a good argument to point out the illegitimacy of your position. But in the clip just now, it seemed as if you were attacking adoption as a principle, as if the people adopting were responsible for children being put up for adoption.
Every child should be raised by his natural mother and father. This rule is confirmed by the obvious difficulties faced by orphan children. A child who lives in a same-sex union environment is never going to have his biological mother or father. He will always be missing a mother or father role model. Through this, we can see that the homosexual movement downgrades and discards motherhood and fatherhood as something necessary for a child, even when children themselves naturally crave for a mother or father.
There's no supply and demand sort of deal going on here. So if you are going to attack adoption and the wonderful people who try to make the lives of children much better by taking them away from said system, then you need to have a damn good explanation as to what you think a pregnant woman unable to look after a child should do, as your group is also anti-reproductive rights. But the underlying message is, children adopted by same-sex parents do equally or even better than children adopted by intersex parents, and both groups do far better than children left in the system. Look at the evidence and acknowledge it.
In the name of the family, same-sex quote-unquote marriage serves to validate the homosexual lifestyle and all of its bisexual and transgender variants. You see, civil laws are structuring principles that guide society. Laws shape the life of society and, as such, can mold the perception of right and wrong. That's why I oppose the legal recognition of homosexual quote-unquote marriage, because it obscures basic moral values, devalues natural marriage, and weakens public morality.
Is that the same basic morality that supposedly had your God order the death of entire populations, genocide by any terms, only for the virgin girls to be begrudgingly spared by God and Moses for the purpose of mass rape? Is that the same basic morality that orders slaves to obey their masters with fear just as they would obey Christ? Because if so, then said basic law has already been corrupted by civil law, and humanity as a whole has evolved to a much better state for it. Not to mention being transgender has no relevancy here beyond the fact that some trans people, just like some cis people, are gay and bisexual. That's the only relevancy to this discussion.
A moral wrong can never be a civil right. The homosexual activists say that same-sex quote-unquote marriage is a civil right, just like the struggle for racial equality in the 60s. This is not true. Sexual behavior and race are two completely different things. A man and a woman that want to get married can be black or white, rich or poor, short or tall. None of these differences are obstacles to true marriage because nature is still respected. Same-sex unions, on the other hand, oppose nature.
It's about Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. If God wanted it to be that way, he would have made Adam and Steve, or two females. He didn't. People he made man and took the ribs and made woman. Not the other way around. People, come on, it's simple. It's simple, and you're confusing the kids.
Two individuals of the same sex can never be married because it's biologically impossible. No matter how hard a man tries, he can never be a mother. One cannot compare genetic racial traits to non-genetic behavior.
So what happened to the bit at the start where you stated you had no intention to defame or disparage anyone? Because right here you equate homosexuality to stealing and cheating, and both here and in the previous point you have outright lied about sexuality to attack individuals. Fact is, science has demonstrated that you cannot change a person's sexuality. Any attempts to do so is destructive. Attempts to do so are in fact so destructive that they are a human rights violation. To repeat, not a civil rights violation, but a human rights violation, because so-called reparative therapy is that destructive to the individual. It tears them apart. So if you want to move away from your violation of people's civil rights to you want to violate their human rights, then by all means we can do so. Also, when did rich and poor become genetic traits? I'm asking as it was something that you acknowledged earlier on and is in dire need of explanation.
Homosexual unions are 100% sterile.
A man and a woman that get married are naturally able to have children and form a family. But homosexual unions, on the other hand, are 100% sterile. The sexual acts of two men or two women will never produce a child. If two men want to have a child, they have to use artificial means and employ surrogates. There always has to be a woman involved. Their unions cannot form families. Someone could object and say, well, you're saying that couples who can't have children shouldn't get married? The answer to the objection is this. Procreation is connected to the essence of marriage and the family. While a man and a woman may accidentally not be able to conceive a child, their union is still in accordance with nature. In contrast, homosexual unions are sterile and not natural. Alan Keyes gives a great analogy of an apple. If the apple has a worm inside of it, or if it's rotten, it's still an apple. Whereas an orange will never be an apple, no matter what you do to it. It's the same thing with homosexual unions. They will never beget families.
Which again is historically illiterate. First of all, marriage really had nothing to do with procreation. We were doing it perfectly fine before marriage came along. Marriage had everything to do with property rights and inheritance, civil matters. Same-sex marriage was illegal before your religion came along and changed the traditional definition of marriage to exclude said variant. But all this is pointless information as you have not demonstrated why same-sex variants are not included. You've asserted it repeatedly, but assertion is not argument. I can assert with equal validity that same-sex marriage is in accordance with nature. Hell, I could assert with the same validity that intersex variants are the real abomination responsible for vast overpopulation on a dying world, or some other tangent with equal validity to you. The fact is, none of this assertion does anything in way of offering an actual argument. Oh, and by the way, not all childless marriages are due to an accident. Many choose not to have children. Also, doesn't your God kind of control people's reproductive organs? If so, how was that an accident and not your God declaring that he doesn't want them to be married? You really need to think about what you're saying in relation to your supposedly divine scripture, because it's so easy to catch you out in this way. This argument completely falls apart, just like the rest.
It defeats the state's purpose of benefiting marriage.
One of the reasons why the state gives benefits to true marriage is this. By nature and by design, marriage provides children with the normal conditions for a stable, beneficial, affectionate, and moral atmosphere. This helps perpetuate the nation and strengthen society. Homosexual unions don't provide that. Their primary purpose, objectively speaking, is the personal gratification of two individuals. That's why homosexual unions are not entitled to the same protection that the state gives to natural marriage.
Again, not all marriages have children, and many marriages between heterosexual cis people are also for their own gratification. Were it not the case, why would people spend so much money and time throwing grand celebrations even though discussion of children hasn't even entered the picture? But gay couples do have children by a myriad of means, just like straight couples, and yes, those unions are equally as valid in every single way, unless you can demonstrate why not. Your proclaimed bigotry does not remove that fact from reality.
By legalizing same-sex marriage, the state becomes its official promoter. In every situation where marriage affects society, the state will expect good people, like you, to betray your conscience, to betray the natural order, and to betray Christian morality. This new type of persecution is already hitting bakers, photographers, and flower shops that choose not to serve same-sex quote-unquote weddings. For example, in Massachusetts, the father of a 6-year-old boy was arrested and put in jail. Why? Because he objected to the pro-homosexual curriculum being taught in his son's school. Unfortunately, more and more children are being exposed to the homosexual lifestyle in school, even though parents don't want it.
That's because actually protecting children is far more of a concern than your mythic woes. Children are dying because of organizations such as yours, and whilst you are all very young and your lives are not dependent on knowing the facts, those behind the scenes putting you up to this should damn well know better. David Parker was arrested for trespassing as he attempted to intimidate school staff into meeting his demands, refusing to leave unless they did so, leading to them calling the police, as is legally right. Oddly enough, schools don't take very kindly to threats made by parents. Fact is, a federal judge dismissed Parker's claims as not constitutionally sound because no, you do not get the right to withdraw your children from information they need to function as a human being in day-to-day life. But the more interesting question is, what gives you the right to dictate the life of same-sex couples? You talk about your liberty, what about theirs? Their liberty is not contingent on invading yours, but your idea of liberty is contingent on invading theirs. You are violating their liberty, not the other way round. Why can you break the constitutional barrier separating church and state to violate the rights of others? If you don't want a same-sex marriage, don't get one. That's called liberty. This is the same basis that declares that your diet does not then get to dictate what I eat. Newsflash, if same-sex marriage affects you, then you are in a same-sex marriage. Want to challenge that fact? Supply demonstrable evidence.
Today, the sexual revolution is telling people to accept unnatural vice. This explains why homosexual activist Paul Varnell wrote, "The gay movement, whether we acknowledge it or not, is not a civil rights movement, not even a sexual liberation movement, but a moral revolution aimed at changing people's view of homosexuality." If homosexual marriage is accepted, what logical arguments can be used to oppose, let's say, 2 men and 3 women from getting married? It's shocking, but elements of certain subcultures are already advocating incest, pedophilia, bestiality, and other forms of unnatural behavior.
This argument always really scares me in how any Christian ever who uses such an argument demonstrates 100% that they don't understand why rape is wrong. I thought informed consent was a pretty basic principle that's easily applied to demonstrate why child rape and animal rape is wrong, because a child and an animal cannot give informed consent. But clearly I'm wrong because so many Christians don't seem to understand informed consent at all. The only ones the slippery slope fallacy makes look dangerous to society is the apologist and the institution utilizing said argument. You are the dangerous ones. Forget TFP Student Action, Catholic, pro-life, pro-family and pro-God. This is TFP Student Action, Mass Rapists Are Us, because we haven't the foggiest understanding of bodily autonomy, but hey, the Bible is cool with it anyway. That is you. You're a bunch of mass raping enablerists and little else.
In the book of Genesis we read, God created man in his image. In the divine image he created him. Male and female he created them. God blessed them, saying, Be fertile and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. Marriage is not the creature of any state. It was established by God in paradise for our first parents, Adam and Eve. Whenever we violate the natural moral order established by God, we sin. That's why same-sex marriage is wrong, and that's why it must be opposed.
Natural marriage is on the right side of history.
Stand on the right side of history.
Defend God's marriage.
And be
on the right side of history.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Fight Back, and please share this video with your friends. To get future episodes of Fight Back, I invite you to subscribe to our weekly TFP Student Action newsletter by clicking here. God bless you.
You guys are morally repulsive human beings. You are not on the right side of history. You just demonstrated that none of you understand the reason rape is wrong, unsurprisingly whilst following a book that declares it is right, it is divine, it is just. The same book which also declares slavery is right. And just like then, you pretend to have some fictional entity on your side that magically bolsters your position, when the reality is you just lack any scientific or ethical basis for your position. You are the nasty scum floating near the top of a cesspool of hate. And yeah, I'm being harsh. You're supposed to be students. You're supposed to be educated. Nothing I have seen here has given me the slightest impression of any sort of education. I had hoped for at least something vaguely new. All I got was the usual putrid bile that has been refuted 1,000,000 times over. My suggestion is you actually look at the evidence before you are written down in history among the likes of so many other vile human beings who inflicted pain on others in their own ways. I'm not just asking you to get on the right side of history, I'm asking you to come back to reality. There are a few things which I'd just like to add here at the end of this video. The first is a massive thank you to everyone who has ever donated to me via Patreon. Your fantastic support has given me the ability to keep this channel going, and I hope to continue producing content in the years to come. Secondly, I would like to thank anyone who has ever interacted with this channel. Your shares, likes and dislikes, as well as your comments of both approval and disapproval, have ensured constant feedback allowing me to improve my work. Last of all, I would like to express my desire that you treat any of the people displayed throughout the video with respect. Whilst it is true that ideas do not demand respect, and there are many in fact which deserve reprehension, we must be careful on how we tackle said ideas in ensuring we are not simply targeting the person. In short, be the compassionate side of reason. So take care, and I'll see you next time.